Hey aspirants, welcome to Insights IAS initiative. Today we'll be taking up a bit more philosophical topics that we had not covered in the past, which had come up in multiple newspapers. So we'll first start with an article from Deccan Herald called Days of Disquiet. So why is the world so angry? So this article is basically mentioning about various wars, conflicts, and anti-establishment movements that is going on in many parts of the world. So all these are nothing but signifying the emotions of the public, which is mainly anger. So we have seen that in the past UPSC has asked questions in GS paper 4 with respect to the vice called anger. We had got once a quote which Gandhiji had told, as in, what does this quote mean to you? And in the other context we had also got a quote on what is the disadvantages of anger. So in such questions, instead of talking about just how the emotion of anger impacts a person on an individual level, we can also talk about how anger at a broader sense signifies something wrong for the society and as well for the whole world and its peace. So here we'll start with the whole article with what the year 2024 was expected to be. So 2024 began with the idea that this is a year of elections. So we see many important countries like India, USA, Russia. So all these countries went for elections where 1.6 billion people voted to enfranchise, who were enfranchised to vote for their government. So as this year is ending now, it is visible that people are angry. So, what makes us say this is that from the political notion, in many countries which had gone for elections, the ruling parties have been overthrown. That is, there was a visible anti incumbencies in most of the parts of the world. So, ruling parties have lost the government, the classic example being the United States. So, this is one of the observations why we tell that people are angry with respect to the current movements that are happening. The second one is, in many cases, opposition parties which support an anti establishment idea, these opposition parties have gained a lot of power or gained a lot of public support in the form of, let's say, the impeachment of South Korean president which was recently witnessed. So the third one we can tell is that the political outrage or the war that is happening in the two fronts, let's say directly in Gaza and Ukraine, but also we see that countries like Lebanon are also finding the unrest. Syrian government was overthrown by a militant group. So all these are nothing but the anger is continuing. The fourth important example for anger mentioned by the author here was the one topic that we had also discussed in a previous ICANN episode related to the anger that public has over many successful ideas, or let's say some popular institutions of the world like insurance companies, where in the case of US a young person shot dead the CEO of a popular health insurance company in US. So anger is represented in this format as well. So basically, if we try to understand why are we living in an era where there is widespread anger, we get the answers in some 5 to 6 points. So if we see, the first idea is, especially in the post pandemic world, trade and immigration is taking a toll. So, what do we mean by this trade and immigration? The movement of goods and people across the world has remained stalled. Let's say there are many efforts towards deglobalization. There are many ideas of self centered development that the countries are focusing. So, this has led to stagnation of trade and immigration across the world. This has been one of the reasons, and how that is impacting. The second reason is that especially people in the lower income groups. So these people in the lower income groups found better economic opportunities if the trade and immigration moved up. So this was a means for them to climb up the mobility ladder or to climb economically richer. But this didn't work as the trade and immigration was not functioning properly. At the same time, we just checked that pandemic has created a lot of difference. It has made the rich richer and has made the poor poorer. So this unrest also is kind of postponed and showing its impact in the present world. At the same time, we see that post-pandemic world saw many trade wars and military conflicts as well. Military conflicts, both of them have led to high levels of inflation across the world. So when there is inflation at a high level, less economic opportunity in this format, the purchasing power of people is slightly coming down, because of which the anger that is seen is kind of justified according to this author. So, what could be the fifth point here? The fifth point is called here as Age of Revolution. So, we use this as a subtitle here because this is nothing but a book written by a popular writer in US called Fareed Zakaria. So Fareed Zakaria tells that after years of economics ruling politics. So if you have seen, this term is very beautiful for us to quote: economics ruling politics. So you can give various example to this, telling that how we have tried to bring 1992 economic reforms in India because economics demanded these political changes. So for that, this idea of economic ruling politics can be aptly quoted in your GS paper 3 answers. At the same time, this was the norm of the erstwhile days, but now the opposite is going on. That is, politics is ruling over the economy. So this reversal has led to all this anger and many widespread unrest among the people, is what is the idea of Fareed Zakaria. The sixth point here that we can talk about is political parties are increasingly polarized. So it may be either complete left or complete right, or a party that is having a central idea. These parties are not ready to uh, attract or try to accept certain blend of new ideas. So because of this political polarization, and that is not limited to just economic ideas, it has also come about taking voters with the idea of culture, or telling about class of the people. These have been the major focus of political parties, rather than focusing on economic development or growth altogether. So this was popularized when recently Donald Trump's campaign was one of them told that if everyone can be American, then what does it mean to be an American? So people here are respecting their class and their culture superiority and want to protect it against the idea that the whole world gets Americanized. So this idea is supported by various political parties, thus stopping the outward growth, or let's say movement, of the whole idea of economic and trade. So the seventh point here is growth and prosperity is seen as a zero sum game. So please remember, this idea is very relevant for us in various discussions of essays. So zero sum game is about, if somebody is becoming richer, let's say by 200% of their wealth going high, this is possible only when somebody is going to lose the same amount. So what is the end reaction, or let's say end sum of this? It's going to be zero. So what is the meaning of this is that if one person has to grow, if one person has to prosper, that is possible only with the idea of the other person becoming poorer. So this idea is the popular belief which is telling that if one has to grow, the other has to lose. So because of this, the idea of the country which is scared that it is going to lose out something is trying to attack its arch enemy in the form of tariff, in the form of sanctions. Let's say it's also in the form of war in the present time. So this idea is very beautiful for you to represent in your essay when you get any idea of how development is not equal, how inclusive growth is not possible, because the current idea runs on a zero sum game concept. So what is the lesson we are learning out of this whole discussion here is the lesson of history is that economic growth is a product of cooperation and not of competition. So at the end of the day, this would be the keynote conclusion for this article, called cooperation is the key for economic growth and not competition. So remember this, the article about anger here, and the connection to economy in GS paper 3, and your essays as well. This would be very much relevant. So the second article is again related to the similar concept of wealth creation. So it was titled Re-evaluating Real Value of Wealth. So this is revolving around Jeff Bezos, who recently made a comment that the world's richest people should not be listed based on the money or fortunes they have created, but based on the wealth they have created for others. So what is the difference between fortune, or let's say money, and wealth? So this discussion is what we'll do under the concept. So first we'll discuss what Jeff Bezos has himself told. So Amazon is not a company that has just got Jeff Bezos richer. According to his words, it has doubled, or in fact multiplied, the amount of investors to a great extent. Let's say today, the investors who have invested in Amazon, have their wealth has gone up almost by $2 trillion. At the same time, it is about not growing alone, but by taking people to growth with you. At the same time, this is an example of publicly held company where many shareholders have their stake, and they have an idea of getting representation in better jobs, better financial status would be an outcome of this, better economic markets would be created because of ecosystems like Amazon. So they have a major role in driving economic, let's say economic trade internationally, ultimately leading to something that we call redistribution of wealth. So with this idea, he tells about not growing richer alone, but by creating all these opportunities for the whole world, so that they will all grow together. So this term was very interesting, and you can use it in your GS paper 4 answers as well, called shareholder capitalism. So, in this idea, the entire shareholding community will grow, not just the owner or the director who started the company. So, this idea can also be applied to economy. So how do we apply it to the concept of economy? So an economic's ability basically is measured by its ability to grow in income distribution. So once its income distribution is growing, we can see that the prosperity sets in the country. So who is doing all this work in an economy? According to the author's perspective, it should be the markets. So what is the work of markets? Basically, they allocate resources, which include income allocation. At the same time, they also have inclusion in wealth distribution. So what will be the role of government in this sector? So if you saw, markets means Amazon in this example, they have redistributed income and they have allocated wealth as well. So what will governments do here? Government would just step in and take the control when markets actually fail to push the economic growth. So countries that above this above model is making it easier to do the business. So as you see, India as well is doing a practice called ease of doing business. So the author tells that the more it is easier for these markets to function, the more better it is to spread the mass affluence. This term would be useful in your answers. Mass affluence, that is mass richness of the fellow beings. So it is easier to redistribute wealth after it has been created, rather than carve it out of the existing stock altogether. So this reminds us of the Justice Bhagavati and Amartya Sen debate, where Amartya Sen tells that we should first redistribute the income to everybody equitably, so that together they contribute to the growth of the GDP pie. On the other hand, Bhagavati, Justice Bhagavati tells that if you give this into the hands of people who are efficient, or basically give it to the market economy, they would lead to increase of this pie, and from this increased section we can easily redistribute wealth. So this article was basically focusing on the second aspect that Justice Bhagavati has always supported. So again, to quote what Jeff Bezos has told, we'll talk about what is the driving force of an enterprise, or let's say the company once it is establishing. it should not be thought that the companies are learning only for income or profit. These companies also should be growing on the idea of innovation. So what he tells is that the Fortune 500 companies that we today have, so these Fortune 5, why do we call them Fortune 5? Because they create money, create wealth in monetary terms. But Jeff Bezos tells that instead of glorifying money, innovation should be glorified. That is, the company which is more innovative, they should be called Fortune 500 rather than the company which just makes money. So it is better to glorify the process and not the entrepreneurship altogether. So good example for this whole concept, that is this idea of Fortune 500 where innovation is encouraged over money making, is a classic example for deontological ethics. So deontological ethics, as you already would have prepared, it talks about the importance of means or following the good path and without worrying of the destination altogether. So this example and this discussion would be very relevant for GS paper 4 corporate ethics, and also various alternative modes for that can be experimented for India's growth story. You can use them in an example for GS paper 3 as well. Okay, so the third topic is related to roots of insufficiency. So on the outset, this topic is not directly related to any of our syllabus words, but if you see, the incomplete analysis or the hidden meaning of this topic is very relevant for us in our essays, especially when we are asked to be a little philosophical in the way we approach our essays as well as our ethics answers. So this was an article from New Indian Express where we'll start this article with the quote from Bhagavad Gita. So we might get this as a question as well in GS paper 4. So we can write an answer for this too. So lift yourself by yourself, but don't condemn yourself. So you are your friend and you are your enemy. Basically, this idea is talking about how helping oneself in the spiritual growth or uplifting oneself towards betterment is something that we alone can do, or let's say external motivation may not always work. The call should be always from our inner soul. So if you recall, this quote itself is very relevant for one of our PYQ essay topics called "It is not the water that is outside the boat that drowns it, but the water that is inside." So in this kind of essays, you can always quote the ideas from Bhagavad Gita when you come across in the newspapers, and you can make a note of them from right now itself so that you'll have a good amount of material for your essays. So this whole article also is based on a similar concept here, as in how we have misunderstood the meaning of life altogether. So we'll start with the comparison the author has done of a typical human life with the people tree. So here, people tree basically symbolizes samsara, or a common household life that we can talk about, or basically the worldly life according to the Hinduism philosophy. Right? So here, roots of this people tree are very much visible. Correct? But other trees that we regularly see in our daily basis, the roots of those trees are hidden. So what is this comparison the author is doing here is basically, it is a life of deficiency is the first idea here. Life of deficiency, that is traits such as we usually spend our life believing that this is the visible growth, or root signifies growth. The more we see the root, we feel that the tree is older, is very full of life. So basically in our daily lives as well, we believe that this kind of visible growth is what is the real growth. So this is what we call a life of deficiency, that is traits such as ego. We can talk about frustration, ideas of jealousy. So basically, if you're observing, these are all the vices that we read in our paper 4: jealousy and selfishness. So these are all some byproducts of our daily mundane life. So what is this upward root signifying here? These upward root talks about perspectives of a worldly person, or a person who feels that the present world is the real world. So they feel that life is progressing and growing upward. Correct. So we always talk about we have to grow forward in life, we have to move forward in life. So what is that forward and upward? It is nothing but our own definition of giving idea to progress. So in reality, if you see, it is not growing upwards, but we are nothing but declining, or leading a very mundane lifestyle here. So reality is that the branches of the banyan tree, or these roots, are nothing but they're going again into the ground. So this is what we call an unprofitable growth, where we focus on upward growth for the purpose of growing. But when we aim to grow in life in this way, we are actually going to the opposite of it. So sometimes in search for better, we actually lose the best. So if you recall, again, this was a previous year essay question. There are always a better option for the best options. If you remember, this was an essay for, I think, 2023. So here, many of the time, what is the meaning of this is, many of the time when we search for better, we use the best. It is about, we would most of the time in our life looking for money, we would be looking for power, we would be looking for a better position in our career or any other ladders, better status in social and economic way. It is all talking about this upward growth of the banyan tree's roots. However, what are we losing in this race of growing, gaining all this? We are losing the essence of life. So we are also losing the vitality of living the life in its own self. So at the same time, when we are in the rush of achieving all these things, we forget what life exactly is. And at the end, when the death approaches, what happens? If you recall what Alexander the Great had told, he tells that when we die, we don't carry any of the materialistic wealth that we have generated on the earth. In the same way, leaving behind all this idea, we just transcend to other life. So life becomes consumed by hope, a progress of upward mobility. Energy is driving this desire is filled with nothing but tension. So all these things at the cost of what? Stress and tension, we can tell. So this analysis of position money and comparing it to banyan trees growth, it would be a very good ideal and way of starting your answer, let's say related to materialism, or even influence of globalization on Indian society, where we have the concept of consumerism. Even in this analysis would be relevant. So what else is discussed here is, there was a kind of analysis done here with respect to how the brain of humans have been trained. So brain of humans for centuries, they have been lost, they are very busy in becoming something all the time. I want to become this, I would like to decorate a position like this, I would like to become this. And what are we doing currently? We are not being anything at the current moment. So humans have most of the time created problems, and then they try to find solution for it, and the whole cycle continues. So don't you think this would be relevant for ideas like climate change, the disasters induced by climate change, industrial revolution, or let's say all the wars that we are going to? It's all because of this brain's transcend idea of becoming and not staying in the present. So hence brain always remains busy in fulfilling desires with the hope of finding fulfillment, and this never happens. So fulfillment basically is an approach to life, not a destination in the future. So this again relates to us our UPSC previous year mains question, that happiness is not the destination in itself, but happiness is the journey altogether. So we can also quote this in our questions of ethics, where we have talked about happiness is the ultimate goal of a human being. Do you agree with this statement? If yes, what does happiness mean to you? So in such answers, these kind of articles would be very enriching and makes your answers very unique. So if we understand the above confusion, that is whatever we have discussed till here, the author calls it as disorder. So once we understood what this disorder is, it means that we can easily manage or create order in our life. So we need to look into the disorder. not just to see it, but we have to understand and make this work. So we are always busy complaining that life is complicated, or we are making it more difficult, rather than simplifying it by focusing on the disorder and order part. So at the end, the author talks about types of desires. One is the desire to be happy, and the other one is desire that arises out of happiness. So the choice is the individuals. Ultimately, what should be the end goal of all the human beings? It should be the art of being joyful despite what the circumstances are, and to understand what the real growth is, not just the upward growth, but the growth of being in one's own present. The last article today is again the power of silence. This again is a kind of philosophical explanation to a very important topic, and this again would be relevant for us in our essay discussions, and also in our ethics second part, where we need to talk a lot about the person's emotions and emotional intelligence. So we'll start the discussion with the concept of silence. So, as you know, silence is often overlooked, or we don't give it the due importance that it needs in our daily lives. So, according to this article here, silence has both spiritual and psychological power. So, silence is not just about keeping quiet, but it is something that we call intentional pause. So, if you recall, in one of our previous articles on should we step out of the treadmill, we had discussed about how silence is going to be very important, or the idea of stopping in our busy life and to think for a second, pause about what we are doing is very crucial at a time when everything is so fast moving. So, in a similar manner, silence is nothing but an intentional pause. It is an opportunity for, let's say, internal reflection and wisdom to emerge ourselves out of many problems of the world. So, on a spiritual notion, stillness, or let's say silence, it allows us to connect with our inner selves. So, why is this so? We will at times in our busy lives do not know what we exactly want, and in just a race of pleasing somebody or making sure we are getting appreciated, we don't introspect as in what we need and what we are doing is true or false. So connecting our oneself with our inner self is one of the important outcomes of silence. So in the words of Mahatma Gandhi ji, he used to tell that silence is a very powerful spiritual tool. It will help us to be grounded. So, grounded during complex struggles of our life. And that is an important spiritual meaning that Gandhiji had used when he had faced the conquest that was coming not only from the Britishers but from his own followers, when he had withdrawn non-cooperation movement after the Chauri Chaura incident. So Buddhism again talks about silence as a path to salvation. So it is a path to salvation and enlightenment. So basically, it is talking about how you understand your inner self, and silence giving an opportunity to achieve that. And the whole concept of meditation is nothing but maintaining silence and looking inwards towards what is the quest of your life. At the same time, Christianity also focuses on silence and tells that it is connecting oneself to God. So, if you have seen, most important religions of the world have focused on silence, and it's important. Now, coming to the scientific part of it, many studies have told that there is a direct connection between brains. Part of the brain which actually thinks, and this study tells that silence shows promise for supporting cognitive and emotional well-being. That is, when a brain is calm and silent, it makes a person a better decision maker and helps them to think rationally and think what exactly is needed to be decided for a particular time. So how is this relevant in the present world? So there is no doubt that the present world is very fast moving, and it's not just about the sounds of the outside world, but the sounds of the inner self that actually needs to be silenced. So why this noise and sounds that is coming, it's not just from the routine lifestyle, but also due to the increased access to social media. And we can talk about how the work that has been a lot of pressure sourcing entity for many. At the same time, there are many daily distractions that humans undergo, which do not allow a person to stay with their own self for a second. So you would have seen many of us who would have been victims of this, that even when we are alone, let's say we are doing some mundane activity like washing vessels or just cleaning the home, there should be some voice or music that keeps coming. Either we would listen to some podcast, or we would listen to some kind of music. But let us try not to use any devices when we are doing the mundane daily activities. That would be a difficult choice. Try this and let us know. So this is nothing but how we are not used to silence or even communicating with our own self. So what is this all leading to? At the end of the day, it leads to stress, it leads to fatigue, because we feel that let us take a break, scroll Instagram or any other social media for some time. But the scrolling is in no way giving us peace, but putting our brain to work every single second. We scroll the new reel or a new shot on the social media. At the same time, this leads to a lot of disconnection of our own self from our inner soul. It helps us to, let's say, not have any focus as well. So what will be the role of silence in the present world? It is to reconnect with our own selves, regain focus in our work. At the same time, it will help us to reflect our own personality as in what we need in our lives. At the same time, it will help people to respond to others with lot of care and affection. So what would be the end result of all of them? It will be nothing but stronger relationships throughout the world. And if you see, this is the goal of peace, or a lesson for whole of humanity. So I hope you have enjoyed the discussions of these four articles today. And there's a small announcement that will not be giving the icon video this Friday. Instead, the episode will be released on Saturday morning, as always, at 9:30 a.m. So thank you for staying with us. Do stay connected to complete to revise more such concepts for philosophical essays and ethics. Thank you so much.